Okay, we're going to go over some of the parts and the terminology and some of the tools that are required and some that you don't have to have but is nice to have. All kits, all the wood strip kits will come with the forms, and the forms are going to slide into the slots of the strong backs. That's for the 72, this is for the 36, 54, even the kayak has a strong back. And I'm going to set it up and do a time lapse as we go. But as far as tools go, some of the priorities that you'll need is the clamps. And these are from Harbor Freight. And you can buy them on sale for $1. They're a 4-inch sliding bar clamp. And on my old videos, and the old method, I didn't have the centers cut out of the forms. So you actually had to push a brad or a pin through the strip into this to hold it in place while the glue dried. It was cumbersome. By cutting out the centers, and of course these are all cut on a CNC router today. The older ones that I sold so many of were done actually on a jig with a router. But here you can see that the strip is on there, and these little sliding bar clamps clamp right down. And you can clamp the strips that way, and you can also clamp them this way. And you will see in the time-lapse video as we go how much I use these. A lot of people ask me, how many clamps do I need? All I can say is that the more clamps, the better. Anybody in the boat building or model building would probably say the exact same thing. These are $1 a piece at Harbor Freight on sale. And for the smaller kit, the 36-inch and the 42, it's nice to have 10. 20 is better. And as far as doing the 72-inch one, it's a good idea to have 20 clamps. Now, the less clamps you have, the more waiting time you have, because it's hard to proceed to the other strip if you don't have enough clamps to hold it in place. So, you know, I have quite a few of them. I have a box full of them, and they're just so handy, and you will see that. So we from time to time do offer them as a promotion on the website. But because every place Harbor Freights are around, you can save yourself the money and just order them from them. But if you can't, let me know and I'll certainly get you some. So the clamp is a big number one. A little hobby saw. Walmart, all places sell them. It's a very fine-toothed, sharp, flexible little saw. Chinese back saw, I think is the other name for it. These are very handy for you put your strip down and you want to cut that angle on it. This is the way to go. All the kits, usually I put in a sanding stick. It's usually a promotion. If you get one, that's good. If not, you can make one. It's basically a piece of wood with some heavy sandpaper glued to it. These are great because they're flat, they're inexpensive, and you can make a nice straight sanding surface. A sanding stick. Like I said, you can make these for very little money. I use actually belt sanding belts cut up, and then I hot glue them to this. But you can use any kind of glue and any kind of sandpaper. Toss them when they're done. A little hobby plane. This is a little tiny one. Actually, Walmart sells it. A lot of little Home Depot might even have them. just a little tiny plane. And the reason this is handy is because a lot of the strips, as you're going around the chine area of the canoe, should be beveled a little bit. You want to take that edge off so that the strips fit a little tighter on the inside. I mean on the outside, excuse me. Because if you didn't do that, you would have more of a gap on the outside. But you can use the sanding stick as well to do that. But this is much faster and quicker. And these aren't even $10 if you can, and they're on eBay, they're all over the place. Little hobby plane. And this is actually a regular carpenter's shingle plane, which does the same thing. It's just heavier and bulkier. Another thing that's very nice when it comes to finishing the model is this hide scraper. And it comes with several different easily replaced blades. This is $15 on eBay. This is a very nice tool. It's a round, pointed. They got a curved one. They got a flat edge. They've got little ones, all for $15, $15 or $16. This is a great tool for scraping off the glue, for taking down high areas, saves you from sanding. Great tool. The other thing that I use quite often, but less than I used to do, is a $10 hot glue gun. Same thing, all places sell them. They're $10 with small hot glue sticks. And I use this primarily for, once I put the forms in place, I put a little bead of glue on both sides. And the reason the glue gun, the hot glue, is good, it sets up fast, and also it can easily be pried apart later, and that's what you will do. Once your model is all built, you're going to pry it off the strong back. I don't recommend using it to glue the strips, which in my old video I did do that, and I have made a lot of kits, and it is fast, but it gums up your sandpaper when you're sanding. If you put the model out in the sun, or for some reason, that glue actually softens up. I've had a lot of problems with it, and so I would not glue the wood strips with it. Only the forms. And once again, you don't have to have that. You could actually drill small holes and put small brads, which work equally as well, but don't drive the brads all the way in. Make sure you leave them sticking out so you can easily get some pliers and pull them out afterwards. Razor knife, of course, but not as important, but it is nice to, quite often I whittle the edge off at the angle, then I use my sanding stick to finish it flat. If you have kids, obviously you need some supervision if they're using this. It's not required to use the razor knife, but it's a handy tool to have. And of course we've got masking tape, reading glasses if you're blind like me, and the other big question is about glue, and one other thing is these small little hammers. I love these. They're $3 at Harbor Freight. Very handy for putting in little brads and so forth. And back to the clamps. There's also these small little squeeze clamps. Same thing, Harbor Freight sells them. They're very inexpensive. I use a lot of clothespins. There's plastic, wood. So any kind of clamp. I've got all kinds of different little clamps, and they're very inexpensive, and they just help hold things in place while you do something else. Okay, a lot of questions about glue. Like I said, I don't recommend using hot glue anymore. In fact, I never use it. Now, I use Gorilla Glue, the Gorilla Wood Glue. And there is also Tight Bond, which is very good as well, and I used that for years. I have found the Gorilla Glue sets up maybe slightly quicker. I just like the glue. I actually sell it also. And this is an 8-ounce container of it, and this is more than enough to do your whole kit. And Gorilla Glue is very inexpensive as well. And Tight Bond is very good as well, and I'm sure the Elmer's glue is good. Also it can get on your skin, no big deal. That's a big thing. And you will get glue on your fingers and on things. And it peels right off, washes off. I don't know what the long-term effects might be, but it dries clear and sands well. This is what I recommend, but there's plenty of glues to use, and it's everywhere. Gorilla Wood Glue, white wood glue. Another nice glue to have in your collection, this is Stick Fast. It's a instant CA adhesive. It's basically super glue, but in a large container. This is $15 on eBay, Stick Fast. I've used a lot of it. There's another one called Hobby Bond. This is a larger container that I buy to fill this up with. The thing about this glue is, and a lot of modelers do use it, this is the medium density, but the fumes are bad. And it gets on your skin, it's very tenacious. You have to wear gloves, you have to wear some kind of plastic gloves. I use it in very high stress areas, around the stems and things like that. It does work well. They sell a deactivator for it. You spray it on or brush it on, and the glue actually breaks apart and you can redo it. So that's a nice thing. But like I said, the main thing is the fumes. And maybe they do sell, I think they do sell an odorless one. But it's good to have in your collection of glues. Otherwise, your Gorilla Glue or Tight Bonds will do everything that you want. And it is strong. So I've been very pleased with this. That's Gorilla White Wood Glue. I do also notice that Tight Bond sells a brown tinted wood glue. I haven't really messed around with it too much, but I have tinted glues with small latex paints if you wanted to tint it for some reason. So I think that's the majority of the tools. And maybe a small drill to drill holes where the brads are going to go on the thwarts and some other parts. But there's other ways around if you don't have a drill. So the other thing, right, is the sander. I use this Orbitable DA by Portacable. Now Black & Decker sells them, Milwaukee, all kinds of them. And in fact, you can even buy a 18-volt cordless, which is pretty cool. And I actually I have a hose that connects to this, to my vacuum cleaner system, and keeps the dust down. You got the holes in the bottom. This has the Velcro release. I use several different grits. I usually start with an 80, and okay, I have taken the strong back that comes with your kit, made out of MDF composite wood, and it's a good idea to be careful with it because it can break, especially where the slots are. I make it out of MDF now instead of the pine that I did for years, is because it doesn't warp, stays straight. I can cut several of them ahead of time and don't have to worry about them warping. That was a serious problem, requiring me to cut them on demand, and that was no good. So attach it, it's a good idea to attach it to a piece of plywood. This is just a piece of OSB, it could be anything. This is a nice thing to do because you can turn the model around, you can move it, but there are people that clamp the strong back directly to their workbench, and that's okay as long as you can get to both sides of it. So I attach it to the panel. I've already had a bunch of these forms used on building other models, so they had some masking tape on them. It's kind of clear. The strong back is labeled A, B, C, D, and it equals the forms that are going to go into that slot. Now, it's going to be a tight fit, and you might have to sand the edge of the forms to get it to fit in there. There could be some burring, or and it's a good idea to hit the form in the center there. Now, this big form doesn't exactly have a center line. The other forms, strong backs, excuse me, for the 54 and the others all have a center line in them. So the best way to do this is to set them up, centering them the best as you can with your eye. Then once it's all together, okay, then we're going to move them around slightly once we put the shear strip on. So let me get the rest of these set up. This is where your little hammer comes in handy. Tap them in place. It's going to be a snug fit. It has to be, because we don't want them moving around. Once I get them in place and I know exactly where I want them, then I'm going to hit them with a bead of glue, of hot glue, or you can put holes and drive a brad down into them. Either way is good. The brads isn't a bad way to go because it helps save the forms. So let me put this all together, and we're going to move on to the putting the first strip, the shear strip on. And also I should mention that on this forms right here, we want to glue those together, the A form and the B, so that they're held tight together. So let me move on to getting this all put together with the masking tape, and we're going to move on to the shear strip. Then we're going to, I've gotten all the forms in place, the masking tape on, and I took the first strip, the shear strip, and I've temporarily put it on. I put it on both sides. Now this is really the trickiest part. It's a little bit cumbersome, but you can play around with it. Get your strips, measure your strip and find the center and put a little brad in it, and then start in the letter G first. Put them on both sides, put some clamps to hold it in place, and then you'll see, like in this particular case, this one form needs to slide over just a little bit. And you do that, and you get the shape so it's nice smooth lines. The C forms are a little tighter because we're trying to make a flare in the bow, so don't worry about that so much. But get it so that it looks like the lines are straight, or smooth, I should say, look down the model. You can clearly see if there's any kind of one form is off or the other. Once you're satisfied with where it is, I'm going to use hot glue, but you can use brads. Drill a small hole and put a brad, and that's actually a good way to go, because you might find you want to move it again for some reason. But for me, to save time, I'm just going to run a bead of hot glue, and everything looks very good, and I'm satisfied with that. So I'm going to hot glue them in place, which I'll be able to rip up later. And you can reuse the forms. I mean, I've built, with these forms here, I have probably built three other models. They do get beat up after a while. So I'm going to glue these in place. Then we're going to trim the ends of this first strip, and we're going to talk more about what you want to look at when we fasten that first strip in place, because that first strip is going to dictate how all the other strips go on. In the kit, in the small package, there'll be some small brass brads. They're actually meant to be used later to finish off the rails to make it look like bolts, but if you go out and buy some of those brads, just some small brads, they're 18 gauge with a small head. I use them for this first strip, and I'll put them, I'll find out where I decide where I want it, and then I'm using a Leatherman, but a pair of needle nose pliers, you can actually place that first strip, attach it to the forms with those brads, and that works very good. You will have a little mark there, but it seems to be the easiest way. And there's all kinds of brads. It doesn't have to be brass ones, it can be steel. So I've got all of these in place. The forms are all glued, and I'm going to cut the ends, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that next strip going on. But I have the shear strip on. A couple of things that I would like to talk about is that the bottom of these forms, the 90-degree angles that's underneath here, that's pretty much a guide where that strip will go. That enables you to set the curve. But still look down it, make sure that it's smooth and there's not a sharper bend at one place or the other. Glue your ends together. Now we're all set. Now the hard part's actually done. The kits, all the kits come with 4, usually red cedar dress strips is what we call them. And I always use this as my second strip because it looks nice. And then you're going to have probably red cedar toe rails. So that's what I always do. But you can put these strips anywhere you want. And people make designs with them. It's your call. But this is what I do. We're going to put this one here. And this is very easy now. So I'm going to do a little time lapse, put that strips on. We'll talk about the ends again. Then I'm all ready to start putting strips on. And it's only limited by the number of clamps you have and temperature, things like that. Here we go. I'm going to cut the end here so you can see that I just overlap it, get a good idea of where it's going to be, and then cut it. We have 5 strips on each side, and we're starting to get into an area where it's a hard curve, hard turn at the chine. And this is where we need to start using a small hobby plane and taking off this inside edge at a bevel. It doesn't have to be a lot, and you could do it with a coarse piece of paper, sandpaper, but this little plane is pretty slick. I've had it for a long time, and it's indispensable. So all I want to do is bevel that just slightly, and it's mostly right in this area here. It doesn't have to be so much the other one. Well, we're closing in. We only got a little bit left to go in here. And we're down to just a handful of strips. And but probably have 4 or 5 more, and it'll be closed in. Well, it's the next day. I got all the stripping all glued. I finished up last night. The whole hull is done, and I just cleaned up the area. I marked out where I'm going to cut. Want to talk about, I trimmed off the bow here, and you can actually see that there's some gaps there. That's okay. We're going to squeeze them all together, and then the laminate's going to get glued on there. Well, alright. I have the model completely fitted after I put the stems on each end, glued them in place, sanded it all down. Okay, I came back this morning, nice and dry. I trimmed off the excess fiberglass. I sanded the epoxy with 150 first and then 220. I'm going to give it another coat and then I'll sand that again. But I'm all set to break it free from the strong back. I just have a pry bar. I'm getting underneath the forms, and I used hot glue to hold it all together, and it seems to be coming free all on its own. So here we go. Great, look at that. So now all my forms, because I used the tape, come right out, and everything looks quite smooth inside here. The bow and the stern, they are probably the trickiest, so be careful because they get the most glue. So I have to work at that one a little bit. And just kind of jiggle them around. So I'm going to take all these out. I'm going to get the sander. I'm going to sand this all down inside. Get a coat, finish it. Get a coat of epoxy on it. Then all the ribbing can go in. Okay, this is the hide scraper. Highly recommend these. It comes with several different attachments. And I'm going to scrape out all the glue that's slipped down. And it's curved, so I can take down a lot of the wood. I assume you can see this. It makes quick work of it. And I would put something underneath it so you don't mar underneath. This works great. The hide tool scraper. Let's see. There we go. Okay, we're going to talk about doing the ribbing. I already have the inside of the canoe all sanded, and then I gave it a coat of epoxy yesterday. So now it's nice and sealed, and the ribbing material that will come with the kit is a thin pine material. Some kits might have red cedar, depends on what you order. But take your measurement. The widest rib will probably be about 18 inches long. Let's see. And just cut it. I cut a whole bunch of them. Here's a whole bunch of them already cut, and I've already formed these. So I'm going to save those that I have left for the very end because I'm not sure about those lengths. Then I heated some water. I didn't boil it, but I get it very close to boiling, and I soak. Let's see if we can see this. I soak the ribs in there for the longer the better, actually. But these have been in there 20 minutes or so. They're wet, they're hot, but you'll see that they're very flexible. It does help because of the grain of the wood. There's different sections that are a little stiffer than the others. So you might want to just work them with your fingers a little bit. Otherwise, they fit right in. I'm using clothespins to hold these in place. And let them stay in place and dry off. Some of the ribs are perfect, and you can tell that the grain is just perfect. I have no way of controlling how they come out. I try very hard to keep them all consistent. I throw away anything that doesn't look good, but these are all nice and pliable. They fit right in. Can we see this? Yes, we can. Okay. They fit right in, and so I let them sit there and dry. Though the glue that we use, the Gorilla Glue, likes water, and it will help to seal them all in. But I did all this. I did them all, and I let them dry overnight. But by the time you get to them, depending on your conditions, they'll be dry enough. So just be careful of the hot water. You need a large pan like this for some of the bigger ones, and just carefully, force them into the water slowly. You can break them. When these ribs, when you get them, they won't bend. They just will break. But by soaking them and heating them, they bend right in there. I'm very pleased with the pine, and I'm using the pine because it looks more like the original white cedar ribbing that was used on the Old Town canoes. Or the that's what they used. So we do offer the red cedar ribbing, which is not the standard anymore. All the kits are going to come with the white pine as standard. If you want this red cedar, then that's an option. Gluing in, I just used a nice wide tip and try to coat it as evenly as you can. It's pretty straightforward, and I put in one side like that. Look out for any pieces of dirt. Okay, I let the glue dry overnight. All the rails are in place, and now I'm going to trim off the tops of the ribs, which I'm using this little back saw, which is my favorite. I use it for everything. It was a Stanley, I believe. And you do have to be quite careful when you cut these, because you can splinter them, but it goes right along. I'm going to trim them all off, and trim off these ends right here. A little hard to... First of all, you're going to get the piece of copper half round. I bent in a eyelet using a vise and a nail. That's pretty easy to do. Now, you can glue just this on, and but it's kind of painstaking, and using the CA glue, it will stick and will stay, but I prefer to drill tiny holes in it. Now, you would think drilling copper is very easy, and it is actually, as long as you use some cutting oil and a very small drill, the smallest drill you can find. You might get some brads in your packet, not always. You just have to go to the hardware store and buy some very small brass brads. It is important to take a punch and make a sharp point on it and make your mark. Okay, now this is a small hole. The drill bit is very fragile. Okay, make sure you can see this. And you definitely have to put, I have cutting oil in a beer cap. Find that little indent that you put. And you want to go slow. And it will go right through. No problem. The key is to go slow, not force it too much. Of course, I can't see, because I'm half blind anyways. That's my biggest problem. Okay, so I just do a bunch of them along there. Now when you bend it, you have to be very, very careful, because you'll break it right at those nail holes. So the next thing I'm going to do is show myself putting it on. Okay, we're just going to do a sweep by of this new 72-inch Canoe light, just so everyone can get an idea of what it will look like. Okay, all of the copper stem guards, the nice design, a little decal, the seats, the lights. And this particular one has the cord coming out in the center, but it can come out wherever you want. There's 6 screws holding that whole light fixture in place, and makes it easy to replace the lamps if you have to. And this is with the epoxy, the crystal clear epoxy coat. Very pleased. That's 2 coats. Okay.